lunch, so I'm glad you're not on camera because that would make my stomach rumble. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Max Gooding, so I'll give you just a little bit on me, that just to help you sort of understand my background. So I've been an independent probably for about 10 years, but prior to that, spent my life working in banking and finance. And that time was spent leading teams, running teams, both large teams and actually just trying to do things like culture change or organizational change. And on my journey, I realized that I got more interested in the people than the work. And as I started to get more interested in the people, that was when I discovered organizational development. Didn't know what it was, someone said, "You're doing OD." I'm like, "What's that?" No idea. Got introduced to OD, did my OD practitioner qualification, found my tribe, got very excited, thought, yes, this is it, I can change the world, only to find that it still didn't work. Mostly because what I now know is that the most success you can get in an organization is through teams. So you can help an individual to be brilliant, you can help an organization to understand what's going on, but where the change really happens is with teams. So as I progressed on that journey, stumbled across systemic team coaching, and I come at this from that sort of big picture systemic perspective. I'm not an individually trained coach. I have done NLP and different things like that, but that's where I come at things. So hopefully that will give you some sense of my journey to here. But before we start, I would like you just to stick in the chat for me, if you wouldn't mind. If we imagine this sentence, I'm curious about systemic team coaching because... It'd be really lovely just to hear some examples or some thoughts from you of what you're curious about it because. And while you're doing that, and Tracy will keep an eye for me, I will start to share some slides. So what I'm going to do is just chat you through what do we mean by systemic team coaching at the Academy of Exec Coaches, why systemic team coaching, and what's the difference between that and maybe coaching as you've maybe previously known it. So Tracy, do feel free to chip in or add things as you see things coming up as well. Apart from when you're on mute, because that doesn't work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Max.
Brilliant. Right. So why systemic team coaching? I guess we need to be thinking for ourselves about how crazy the world is at the moment. Okay, that sort of realization that there is so much that everybody has to deal with, and we're just operating in a very complicated and chaotic context. So there's increased pressure for resources, there's a lot of global migration, political, societal instability. I mean, the scale of the change and the challenges that we're all facing is overwhelming and can be quite daunting. And we talk about the word complexity, but actually I think only this week I was chatting to a team about actually it feels sometimes more like just chaos. So there's a growing need to really help teams and leaders leading teams to help to understand all of that, to be able to navigate it and be able to do positive things in terms of whatever change they're wanting to bring about, not just for their organisation, but for all of the context within which they're operating, and also to make sure that when they're doing that, they're not actually doing damage to their people, to their communities, to the world that they're operating within. So there's a real recognition that teams need support to operate systemically because they need help to be able to understand, okay, but how do we do that? How do we help them to bring that outside in? How do we help them to bring the future back into the here and now? How do we help them to really shape their shared endeavour and make sure that they're not just in service of that market share or profits, but that they're in service of the wider context and the widest context? It's still a relatively new discipline, team coaching, and if you think about it relative to coaching. So that's also part of the reason why we're shaping it for you today, which is to help you understand what do we mean by team coaching. So when we think about systemic, let's start there first. Systemic is about helping a team understand where are they? If we put them at the center of their own web, where are they and what are the systemic forces that are operating on them? And which stakeholders are they connected to, and how positive and helpful is the connection they've got to those stakeholders? but also what might be the prevailing conditions within which they're operating. So if you think about this web and you think about what the weather that's going across this might be, whether it's rain, wind, could be just the heat when we think about what it's like in the UK today. So we're inviting them to really think about what they're delivering to their stakeholders and how, if they change one bit of their system, what the implications and knock-on effects might be for other parts of their system. And you can see now why, when we look at it like this, it's easy to start to bring in practices that might be more familiar if you've operated with a sort of organizational development or organizational dynamics mindset. And we're bringing those concepts and ideas into the team so that we can help them operate more systemically. The other thing here is to recognise that as systemic team coaches, when we're working with teams, there's a real opportunity for us. I was at the EMCC conference week before last, running a session talking about how important it is that teams recognise their responsibility for driving inclusion and diversity, not in terms of protected characteristics, of course they've got that responsibility, but how do they actually drive it in its broadest sense? How is the way that they operate driving greater inclusion, driving greater diversity throughout their teams and throughout the organisations that they connect with? So when we think about systemic, I'm going to call on John Whittington's work. For those of you that have done individual coaching, you probably might know even more about this than I do, having read his book. I haven't yet done any of his live coaching. He talks about systemic being a combination of three things. Something that prioritizes the system requires you to have a stance yourself on what do we mean by systemic and what does that mean for me as the coach, bringing that into the conversation, but also to operate with a set of principles. How do you operate within the system, thinking in the widest context, but also what are the practices that you would then adopt that with the combination of you, the principles and the practices would mean systemic team coaching. Now that's when we think about it from a sort of coaching an individual leader using constellations to say, okay, so how do we help that individual think systemically? But where are the approaches that apply to teams? So I'm sure you're very familiar with Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, or certainly aware of that. There aren't that many approaches out there that are ways of doing team coaching. There's lots on leadership, there's obviously lots on different coaching styles, there's lots on culture and OD, but there really is not much in terms of structures, approaches, frameworks for teams. And the joy of the approach that we use at the Academy of Exec Coaches is that it's a framework and a process that allows you to integrate lots of different approaches into one place to make a coherent experience for the team that you're working with. So it builds on what you've already got, but it also gives you some structure and some confidence. Said it already, fundamentally, when we're team coaching, it's not about improving the individual, it's all about the team. So there's a couple of, there's some words here from Ruth Wageman and some colleagues that you work with about the importance of team development and the fact that actually this is about bringing about a whole different way of operating. And if we've overinvested in leaders, sometimes they are disinclined to operate collaboratively and co-creatively, and so there's a lot of work to be done with teams to help them to leave those individually rewarded behaviors behind and actually to come into the room and get on with the heart of teamwork. So what do we mean by systemic team coaching at the Academy of Exec Coaches? We're talking about really operating at multiple levels all of the time. Now, obviously, when we start working with a team, it's unlikely that they're going to be operating at all these levels. But as a systemic team coach, we need to be thinking about all of these different layers, all the different relationships between each of the layers. So it's not just what's the relationship between each of the team members, but how do they attend to those relationships and the relationships out with the team? And how do they relate to functions, suppliers, other layers outside of their immediate in the room team? What it isn't is a once a year offsite just to say, how are we doing, team? come up with a set of action plans and then not attend to it until this time next year. So we start with team coaching, really thinking about all of these layers and what's the context that the team is operating in. But when we think about how Peter Hawkins describes it, he talks about systemic team coaching being not dissimilar to the way that John Whittington describes it, which is a combination of how are we being as team coaches, and that's about self as instrument. How are you being uniquely you? And then what are the disciplines that we should be bringing the team's attention to and our attention to that would drive a good team performance? And then what's the process or the journey that we need to work with the team on, co-create with them, that helps them on their learning journey? So there's how am I bringing myself uniquely to this team coaching relationship? What are the disciplines that me and the team need to attend to? And also, what's the journey that we need to go on together?
Max, I was wondering if it might be a good opportunity to pick up on a question that we had, which I know you've touched on already, but it's more just around how systemic team coaching does compare to other forms of team coaching. And I was wondering if you could say a bit more about that sense of being and how what that brings to team coaching.
Absolutely. My sense with the systemic team coaching is that you are, to use the self as instrument point, you are using yourself as a data point, both in terms of what are you noticing when you're in the room with the team, what are you noticing about how you interact with the team when you're away from them, but also, so that's one part of it. The other part is, if I think about my background, when I was growing up, I played netball, lots of netball. And so I'm very steeped in team. I'm very steeped in whoever turns up on the day, they're the ones that have to play. So it doesn't matter if you've only ever played wing defence, you're going to have to play wing attack today because there's a gap in the team. So I bring to my team coaching a certain set of experiences. And that means that my relationship with the team is built around that being. And this is a fundamental part of systemic team coaching as we coach it at the Academy of Exec Coaches, which is, who are you? What have you been through? And how does that make you uniquely you? If I give you another example, somebody who's just coming through the diploma at the moment, and we talked about her upbringing and the fact that she grew up in a family business. And actually what that means about the way that she is brings herself to team coaching is she's absolutely steeped in that, understanding the differences in managing relationships, where in 1 minute you're in the boardroom and then the next minute you're at the kitchen table, and how do you actually still manage to have a good cohesive business and teamwork whilst at the same time managing those family relationships? Does that answer a bit of it, Tracy?
I think that answers it really well, thank you.
Okay, so where are we? What is systemic team coaching from an AOEC perspective is, firstly, we are working with the team in its entirety. It has to be a team that is unique in that it's this set of players on the pitch in this moment, at this moment in time, and we are needing to be interdependent. Otherwise, it's just a working group. When working with them, you're working on how do they operate when you're with them in the room, as well as how are they operating together when you're not with them, and also how are they operating when they're apart. So can they actually have a coherent agreement, decision, and then leave the room and still be experienced by the rest of the system as a team, even when they're not there as a unit? That it's focused on the collective performance and the collective leadership. So it's not focused on any one individual. And it's about making sure that all of the relationships that the team needs to have in order to deliver and to meet its purpose are working well. And that relationship can be to a future stakeholder. So it might be the next generation. So it could be quite an abstract relationship, but it's important. Or it could be a very practical, tactical relationship, like a key supplier that they're dependent on. Or it could be the board that has commissioned them. but what are the relationships that they've got with all of those important stakeholder groups? We talk about the need for the shared endeavour to be something that is transformative for the organisation, but is also value creating. And we've shifted away from this idea of high performance and more towards this concept of what good are you doing in the world? What are you bringing into the world that is adding value to your people, your customers, your patients, your students, whatever the organisation's key stakeholders are, as well as not doing any damage. What it's not is those one-off interventions. That's not to say that there isn't value in one-off interventions, but just certainly systemic team coaching would not be just that one-off thing. It's not just team building. There are team building elements within it. We do some team building content, approaches, but just team building is not systemic team coaching. It's not about coaching individuals. We do coach individuals as part of a systemic team coaching approach, but it's in service of the team. So it's not about them and their career and their leadership individually. It's coaching them in service of the team and the shared endeavour. It's not, so therefore it's not about saying we will coach those two individuals because we think they need help, but everybody else doesn't get any support. You're either coaching everybody individually and in the room, or you're only coaching everybody in the room. You're never picking anybody off. And I think you said it there, it's not training fundamentally.
Max, I'm wondering whether it might be possible for you to share a little bit in sort of general terms what a systemic team coaching assignment might look like for a client. There's been a question just around sort of if they were to sort of undertake systemic team coaching as a qualification, what sort of would be a typical systemic team coaching assignment length and the sort of team you might work with?
Yeah. So I've got a team that I'm working with at the moment, which is an organisation that does a lot of marketing and product branding around fresh fruit and veg, which is quite fun. I always get to go to Broccoli Towers, as I call it. And what I'm doing with them is I'm working with the executive team over a period of time. So I see them every month. About every quarter, we have a sort of step back day where we spend time kind of going, where are you at with strategy? Where are you at with performance and the things that you wanted to do? But I also meet with them monthly, where for the last 6 months, the meeting has been on a particular topic. So we've talked about change, or we've talked about delegation, and we've talked about like almost sharpening the tool type stuff. And then we've gone, okay, but what about this is relevant to you as a team and to you as an organisation now, to help them work out, okay, so how do they help the organisation shift? And then more latterly now, meeting them monthly to be with them in their business as usual meetings, just to notice the group dynamics and to help them to work on that team charter around their team behaviours. And then I'll get invited in for ad hoc work around sort of more systemic stuff, like might be the all staff day. I might support them on that. So that's one example. Another one, I'm working with a London university, and we have same thing, quarterly away. It's not a day, it's a day and a half, so that we get a sleep. And they're also getting individual coaching in between. So we've done that sort of psychometric, but we've also done the, okay, psychometrics are interesting, but what does this team need to do over the next year or 2 years? What are the behaviours we need to demonstrate? And then what does that mean for me in terms of my psychometric profile? What do I need to dial up, dial down? So they get an individual coaching in service of, and that I'm doing this with another coach. So there's 2 of us in the room when we're with them quarterly. And also then individual coaching in between. Again, all in service of what is the shared endeavour. Is that right?
Yeah, so Max, what I'm hearing from that is it's a much longer term intervention, and your work with the team probably extends into many months, possibly up to a year.
Yes. So I would say I don't think I've worked with a team for less than 6 months. And even if it's longer than a year, it usually, well, not it always involves recontracting, because they will have shifted. So the relationship you've got with them and the support that you give them will change. I have got some teams where the relationship has come, you know, but the work we've done has come to an end, and I do more like MOT checks. So I might turn up and they sort of, it's a bit like a large group process conversation where we might have a half-day check-in on how are things, and just helping them to remember what they agreed before that they might have lost sight of, that sort of thing.
Great, thanks, Max.
Great. Let's go, where are we? So come on slides, you're not playing now, are you? There we go. So we're no longer talking about high performing teams. I think I've said that, and that we're creating value. It's really about the ecosystem that sits around a team, and not doing the damage. Increasingly, as team coaches, I'm finding, and certainly the team coaches we've been working with over the last year or so, are increasingly bringing that conversation to the team, which is lift your heads up, notice much more about the world that you're operating in. What would the world have wanted you to do if we look back from 20 years from now, and look back and say, what else should this team be doing? So it could be things like getting B Corp accreditation. It could be tapping into things like donut economics that Kate Raworth talks about. It could just be noticing that your purpose is very stakeholder, shareholder focused, rather than being much wider, more societally based purpose. So our definition: bringing a whole team together over a designated period, but I think, as I've already demonstrated, that can change and stretch. Aligning around their common purpose, bringing their differences together. Quite often working with teams, there isn't shared leadership. There might be leader and everybody else. I always talk about teams very often operating in the climate where the leader says, we need to make a cake, and each of them go, okay, and they go off and they make their slice of cake, and one comes back with a bit of chocolate cake, and someone else comes back with a bit of Victoria sponge, and somebody comes back with a bit of jam tart, and you put it all together and you go, well, that's not a cake. So this is about the shared endeavour and the shared leadership, and helping a team to operate in that way when they're in the room together. It is about delivery. So it is about them being really clear on what is it that they want to do together, and how are they going to be sure that what they're doing is achieving their objectives. Even this week, one of my clients that I'm working with, were getting ready for our next quarterly offsite, and in the business as usual meeting, they were realizing that they were reporting that they had done stuff, but they hadn't reported whether it had made any difference. So they were realizing that the way that they were measuring their performance wasn't helping them. So that sort of shift, just because it's on the shopping list doesn't mean it's done what it needed to do. Making sure that we help them to be active in their relationships with the stakeholder groups. So that doesn't mean once a year having a reporting meeting. It's about having a dynamic relationship. And that can be anything from all of the employees of an organisation to, I think I've already mentioned, suppliers, could be local communities that are impacted by the offices that people are working within, for example. And it is about working together on that longer term transformation, whatever that means for the business that you're working with or the organisation that you're working with. So how would you do that if you are wanting to become a systemic team coach? This is about bringing a lot of things together. So we talk at the beginning of the certificate programme about who you are and what's brought you to this moment in time. Oh, what's it doing? It's having a moment. Come on. Oh, here we go. So you might bring skills from individual coaching. There's a little watch out there, because there are some things that we do in individual coaching that we won't do in team coaching. So there are some unlearnings to be done. You might have skills at working with groups already. So you might be used to doing group process, or focus groups, or all staff meetings, events like that. You might be used to doing facilitation. So you might already be working in a learning and development environment, or you're a leader and you're used to facilitating staff events or workshops. You might be somebody who's already got some of the tools in your kit bag around team building. So you might have some psychometric badges, you might have some approaches that help you to get a team moving. You might, like me, have some background in organisational development. You might also have some background in consulting. And all of these things come together to build what is a systemic team coaching practice and what makes you uniquely you. And what it is giving you the credibility to be on the pitch sometimes with the team, which is the slight difference with team coaching to individual coaching, is that we're not always just alongside. Sometimes we might get on the pitch and go, it looks like this. So the framework that we use, and some of you may be familiar with this already, this is the 5 disciplines. And if you're looking at this, you'll see that you've got on the right-hand side, you've got what's going on outside the team in terms of the stakeholders themselves and what are they asking the team to do. So what's the contracting that's needed? What are they expecting this team to deliver? Then you've got on the inside, how does the team translate this into, okay, they've asked us to do that, but how do we make that something that's exciting, inspiring for us, is purposeful, it's going to motivate us? And how do we translate that down into a strategy? How does that translate into plans? And how does that then translate into the way we organise ourselves and the way that we create our governance and our rhythm and rigour? So that's sort of outside and then going to the inside. We then drop down, and go into the team relationships. So this is where historically probably many of you might have experienced team coaching, but it tends to only sit in this team relationships quadrant, where what we say at the Academy of Exec Coaches is often you can be working on interpersonal dynamics, but if we're not really clear on what we're here to do or who's doing what, or that clarity hasn't been created because the commission and the expectation isn't clear, then you'll be trying to solve problems down here that actually are located elsewhere in the system. So once that relationship is clear and you've got the clarity, then you can really drive through on the team relationships, because the performance will then come because everybody will know what they're trying to do. And then over here we have outside the team, but also on the people side of things, what are all those connections into the relationships and the wider system that the team need to attend to, whether it's economic climate, politics, as much as, okay, but what about our relationship with the HR function? And then in the middle, the 5th discipline, which we work with all the time, is team learning. So whenever we're working with the team, whether it's in a BAU meeting, whether it's in a quarterly offsite, whether it's in the one-to-ones, it's all about, okay, but what are we learning? What are we learning about us as a group? What are we learning about our context? What are we learning about our stakeholders? So we use this framework as a way of understanding what's going on, but we also use it as a guide as to where does the work need to be done? Where is this team needing more of something to help them to achieve their shared endeavour? Then what we do is we have a process that says, okay, but if that's the framework that says what's going on in the team, what's the journey we take the team on? And we start by working with a team on, okay, so what do you think you need? And let's contract with you to do that. That's our first opportunity to meet the system. We then go in and actually lift up the stone. And we help the team to lift up the stone and have a real look and a real forage around to say what's really going on here. And we're very clear when we're working with teams that these are very distinct steps, where you might go through scoping where the team thinks that they want to help with X or Y, but by the time you've finished your inquiry and discovery that you do with the team, that you find that actually they need to work on A and B as well as Y. So we usually have a sort of contractual break there. And then we will move into, okay, and what's the work the team needs to do? And what support do you need to give them as a systemic team coach or coaches that will support them in that journey? We'll then move into the actual doing of the work, which is the execution phase, which as Tracy highlighted earlier, could be anything from 6 months to a year, might even be longer. And you will be working through all of those different 5 disciplines, not in order, but probably on many of them all at the same time. Sometimes it'd be 2, sometimes it might be 3, but it's an ongoing process. And then lastly, when you get to the end of your journey, you would be working with a team to say, okay, so how did we get here? What have we learned? How did we learn? And how do you sustain it after I'm gone? So how do you pick up the coaching baton yourselves? So when we're working with you in terms of building your capability to do systemic team coaching, this is what we mean about the disciplines and the process. There's you bringing yourself, what's all your experiences and skills and know-how. What are the 5 disciplines? So we've got those clear, and then the process, the CIDR process, which is scoping, inquiry, development, execution, and then review. That's a lot. And what we do on the Systemic Team Coaching Certificate is a speed shop, as I like to call it, through the supermarket, where we imagine you pushing your trolley around, you're going to have an experiential journey with an imaginary team, and we take you through a very fast version over 3 days of all the different disciplines and the process. And at the end of that certificate, if you're then still excited about systemic team coaching, then you can join us on the diploma, where we spend a lot more time doing a deeper, slower dive in all the different aspects of systemic team coaching. And it gives you an opportunity to really build an understanding of your approach to team coaching. And you get feedback from much more time for feedback from your peers, and you would work on a case study. So the way this structure, I'm going to pause, Tracy. I feel like I need a pause.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I just wondered, Max, whether it would be a good point to pick up on a question we had as well from Joanna, which was just around, you touched on psychometrics when you talked about the example of the team you were working in. I think she was curious to learn a little bit about what you might use and any that you might have recommend in your work with teams.
I personally use Lumina, which I like. So if you and I like it because it's more colours based, so it's easy for people to have the connecting language and conversation. I just find that eases things through. I think it kind of doesn't matter, because most organisations have usually chosen one already. So invariably you're going in and saying, have you already done something, and is that something we can use and build on? So draw on the work that's already been done. You've also got a diagnostic that we use with the team, which is the TC360, Team Connect 360, which is it's not a psychometric, but it is a diagnostic on where are you at, and it's against the 5 disciplines. And actually that's more useful at the beginning than probably just doing everybody's psychometric profiles.
Yes, that's right. So the Team Connect 360 you become licensed to use after attending the Systemic Team Coaching Certificate, which is the foundation level training. And it's built, isn't it, Max, the questions around the 5 disciplines model to really help the team to discover what's going on. And that's then presented back to you in quite a visual report to help you in setting the agenda with the team and helping them to work through what the priorities are. There's also been a question, Max, about practice hours and assignments, and I'm guessing that might be relating more to the diploma program. So just to clarify the distinction between the two, the Systemic Team Coaching Certificate is the foundation level course. It's 3 days of theory and practice. So you'll be shown tools and techniques. And as Max has already shared, you'll be working through a business simulation. So it's a role play, but you'll have the opportunity, and it feels very real having observed this many times. And it's different each time the course plays through, but they have the opportunity to coach, to observe, and also play part of the team. And there's lots of great shared learning in a really sort of psychologically safe space for participants on the programme. As Max has alluded, it is quite an intense 3 days as we try to show you a whole team experience in a condensed time frame. Yeah. But at the end of the certificate, you'll have a framework to use that's applicable with teams, some tools, and you'll have been shown some ways, whether you attend a virtual or a face-to-face program, ways in which you can help the team through the process. We have our diploma program, which the certificate you can then, if you want to continue your practice, you can then go on to. But we're just actually at the moment just working through a redesign where we're looking at just changing and extending some of the modules and refreshing the content. And we're hoping that's going to, well, further details and the exact sort of timeframes and the qualification period of that will be known probably by the autumn. And we're hoping the first programme in the new iteration will be available by January 24. So I can't sort of share the exact sort of assessment process, but we're not envisaging it to be too dissimilar from what currently exists. Max, perhaps you might explain a little bit about what would be involved if somebody were to go through the whole programme and the diploma.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll stop sharing that thing there. So you would need to have a case. So you'd need to have a client case. Often people will offer, find themselves a pro bono client if they can, and that would run alongside your program. It doesn't always run perfectly. That would be magical if everybody managed to do that. So sometimes somebody's already started with their team, sometimes their team starts a little bit later, but you need a case study because you've got to be able to write that up. So you've got to be able to say, I did this, it went well, I did this, it was a car crash, this is how I'll do it differently next time, that sort of stuff. The rest of it, there is an amount of attending. Obviously, you've got to attend the modules, and there's an amount of reflective work that you're expected to do between each module, both either in preparation for that module or after the module in terms of what did we learn. There's a recommended reading list, which is there's a shorter recommended bit, and then there's a longer here, go explore list. So you're just recommended to do reading around the topic. And that contributes to when you do your write-up at the end, because you will write up, how did I get on with my case study? How did I get on the programme? Who was I at the beginning? Who am I at the end? What key learning experiences really shifted me and shifted my mindset? But you'll also then do a piece around, and what's my version of team coaching? And the way I describe this is it's both exciting and scary. It's a bit like being taught how to play football and then being told, go and create a ball game that's got a ball and a certain number of players and a pitch, but you can't call it football. Good luck. So you have to come up with your version. How do you put yourself into the game? How do you create a version that says if Tracy was to come and coach a team, they'd get the Tracy version of team coaching, versus if Max turns up, they're going to get the Max version, but they're still going to consistently get a shift in their performance and a shift in their team dynamics. So there's consistency around the fact that we'd all drive a difference. It would just be that it would be your version of difference and your relationship with them. So does that answer the qualifications thing?
I'm hoping so. I think, well, from my perspective, that was really clear. In terms of number of hours practice, we talked about somebody having to have a case study or a client to work with during the programme. Again, the programme runs, doesn't it, over a 12-month period generally, Max. So they would be working, we'd be expecting them to work with their team during that period. So the practice hours will be very much, I suppose, dependent on that time frame. Have you got any sort of gauge on sort of in real time what that might mean for work with the team?
It's going to completely depend on the team that you end up jumping in with. So I was
that's lucky. What you might say.
the it depends answer. Some people were having, just quarterly meetings, development meetings, and but still going through that CIDR process, because you've got to get through the majority of the CIDR process. You may not get to review because you may not have finished your relationship with the team, but you can get to a point. For others, for mine, I know I was quite immersed with my team, and I had a lot of one-to-one stuff going on as well. So it depends. By the way, that doesn't mean you have to do pro bono. So you can still charge for working with a team. What Tracy's saying is you can't say you're a systemic team coach accredited, but you can say you're in learning. And I certainly got paid while I was letting them be my guinea pigs, which they quite enjoyed, actually. They were quite up for that. So,
and it's fair to say, Max, not everybody progresses through to the diploma. Some people, or they might not go straight through to the diploma. They might work with teams. build up their practice for a time and then join a future cohort. So sometimes people want to go straight in and will continue from the certificate straight through to the next available diploma. Others work in the field a bit longer and then come back and want to take that deeper dive and to have that sort of the stamp of that qualification as part of their credentialing.
Absolutely. And I think the thing I got out of the journey was, and I'm sure many of you will have experienced this as well, it's the joy of learning with other people who've got very different experiences to you, both in terms of the clients they work with, the locations, the geographies they work within, and you learn a lot more from that experience, or not a lot more, you learn as much from that as you do from the program and the content. And there is enough space in there for you to choose to take a particular flavour of your team coaching, because there's so much breadth of stuff out there that you could choose to focus in on.
And a question just popped through actually about the Team Connect 360, and that was just around, is it's available after the certificate, which it is. So the business simulation that we use during the program uses the Team Connect 360 so that you get familiar with the report and also the model and the framework as you're working through. But there is a charge for using it when you come to use it with your client teams. We have a special price for our students, and often our baseline price, which is £750 for up to 30 responders. And that generally works for most teams. That would include all of the team themselves and then a subsection from different stakeholders, so not inviting absolutely everybody to participate, but just so that you get a good sense of views for the team. But of course, what we encourage our coaches to think about is when they're looking at pricing for their team coaching assignments, they might be building in an additional cost for debriefing, and also what's the client price. So that's just what we would charge you as the coach, but you'd need to be thinking in the context about how you might be delivering and working with the team and how you make that work for you.
And just some clarifying for you, Kazumi, on the certificate, no, you don't need a client. You will be the client. Everybody who's on the program, we have a simulation, as Tracy said, and you will have an opportunity to be the client, to coach the client, and to observe other people coaching the client. And that's what we mean about it's an intense experience, because what it also is stretching you to do is to think about, what am I experiencing? What am I noticing? What's going on in there? There's multiple levels. So you're immersed in all that it would be to be a team coach over a period of 3 days. I'm not going to lie, it's long days. There is some fun.
Lots of fun. But also, just because we appreciate it is quite sort of intense, the theory and practice element, what we have is we have an introductory webinar at the beginning where we bring everybody together. You get to meet the faculty and the other participants. You'll have some pre-reading, so you'll have gone away, had a look at that, had a look at the simulation, so you'll be aware of what's coming up. And it just means that when you arrive on your first day, you've met everybody. We know that everyone's on the same page, everyone's read the materials, and we can sort of, you're ready, aren't you, Max, to get going?
Yeah, absolutely.
And hit the ground running. Yeah. And then we also acknowledge that actually after that intense period, it's really nice for you all to come back together again and actually maybe we invite people to bring perhaps a scenario of their own team that they might be part of, or a client that they're working with, and then you go through another version but using a real life team, if you like, and come back to help consolidate that learning. So the course actually extends to more like 4.5 days.
Yeah. And I think that's when the penny drops. You'll go through a cycle on the 3 days, and we talk about it, which is on day 1, which you can probably recognise in other learning experiences. Day 1, what on earth? Day 2, this is hard. Day 3, oh, I get it. And it's, I mean, that's oversimplified, but that's the experience with the diploma. You've already been through that. It's now sort of almost going back through it again and going really deep. And in terms of your question, Andrea, it depends on how you work with your teams. If you work with teams virtually as well as in the room, then it probably wouldn't hurt you to do the first one virtually and then do the diploma, which is face-to-face. But personal preference, really.
We've been running virtually now, obviously. We've sort of developed the virtual format post-pandemic when we weren't able to be in the room together, but actually it's become such a popular way of training. We offer both a variety of face-to-face and virtual options. And the tools and the exercises, Max, it's fair to say, have been adapted so that we show you ways of working with the team virtually and using some of those tools and techniques. But the faculty are also generous in sharing with you, well, if you were in the room, this is a way you could do it slightly differently, but in a virtual context, this way can really help the team bring it to life. So we get great feedback on both programs. So I think it does just come down to what works for you, travel, costs, time, but there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to choose either that suits.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the fact that we get more of an international crowd when it's the virtual systemic team coaching one. So that adds to it as well, because we just get a little bit more variety and
Yes.
different experiences.
I'm just wondering, Max, whether we might invite any further questions, or if not, we can sort of share a little bit more on upcoming dates, maybe, if that would be of interest to everybody.
Yeah. Anybody not asked something that they're thinking, I want to ask that? Okay, shall we share the dates then?
Let's.
So, what have we got? She says, looking at this, thinking, I've got to try and remember now. Here we go.
It's the final slide, Max.
There we go. Right, okay. So we've got a virtual one in September. We've got a face-to-face one in October and November, Tracy?
No, sorry, I think there's been a little misprint on that one come through there. The November programme will be virtual, just to space them out, and then we'll be looking to schedule a face-to-face again in London in January. Just to let you know, in terms of offers, we do have an offer currently on the September virtual programme. It's a 10% offer currently until the end of this month. So if you are particularly interested in getting going and those dates will work for you, we'll be sharing those after today with the recording. You can benefit from the offer. I also just wanted to make you aware that the price is increasing from the 1st of July for all new bookings to 1,950 for the certificate level programme. So just in case that sort of, I just wanted to make you aware in case you were thinking further into the future, just to be aware of that from a budget point of view. And probably within the next sort of month or so, we'll be having dates, sort of further dates, further out throughout 24. So typically we have a certificate running most months throughout the year. We normally have a break in August because everyone's on holiday, and then again at Christmas in December. But there's generally a course every month that you can hopefully find one that works for you. I mentioned that we touched on this earlier when we were looking at sort of the format of the training, and the diploma. It's looking like it will be ready for delivery with dates for 2024 and with further information in the autumn. We're not expecting too much in the way of a price differential on the current design, but obviously this is all sort of subject to change while we look at redesigning this. However, that's inclusive of the certificate programme, which serves as module 1. So the pathway through to the diploma is you take the certificate first and then come on to the diploma programme.
I think it's fair to say that some of that redesign is about the fact that we've seen a shift in the accreditations around EMCC and ICF for team coaching. So some of it's about that, but some of it's also just about recognising the way that the world is at the moment and the different ways of operating with teams. We even talk about intact teams, and I laughed this week saying, like, what is one of those? A team that's actually together consistently and has the same players in it for a period of time. Don't think I've worked with one of those for a while. So there's some stuff about updating as well, like what are the team challenges now in this sort of post-COVID, if that's a thing still, post-COVID world. Got some more messages, Tracy. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I was just having a look, and there was a question around the time which I put back in the chat. So it's 9 till 5 for the 3 days of theory and practice. The introductory webinar usually runs the week before, normally the Thursday or Friday, but we'll share with you the exact dates and timings, and that runs for 2 hours. We have a little bit of flexibility for people that can't make that date. It's great if you can be there, but we do share recordings because sometimes it can be difficult to make sure you're available. But we do have to have your commitment for the 3 full days. That's really critical for your learning experience and for the rest of the group. The consolidation session, again, that's a half day, usually follows week or the second week after the theory and practice is finished, where we bring the group back together. Again, sometimes we have people saying, but I can make all the dates apart from that one, and in which case we can allow you to join a future session. So there's a bit of flexibility, but not on the 3 core learning days.
And again, signing up for those 3 days, it is about you clearing the decks. Not about saying, oh, could I make a call at lunchtime, because you'll just find it a little bit challenging. You'll need those 3 days. It's brilliant and it's great fun. And you'll go away with so many realizations around what you've already got in your toolkit and how you can use it or use it differently, but also just have a really different mindset and approach to working with teams when you come out the other end. So.
And it's also fair to say, Max, you would be invited to join our community of practice as well. So we have a closed group on LinkedIn where you can connect with other team coaches. Could be a useful way of sharing information together, or just for reaching out for support and to start sort of building your own sort of team coach network. So that's something that's also available once you've completed the certificate.
Good. I always find these ones a bit strange because I have not said hello to anybody really properly. So could you all just come off mute and say hello before you say goodbye?
Yes, and I just wanted to answer another question in terms of signing up. Yes, there's an online application form. So once we close the session today, this afternoon, you'll receive a copy of the recording, the course dates, you have all the dates and times, and also a link to an application, and also a link should you want to book a one-to-one call if you've got any specific questions that you haven't managed to answer today or that you would just like to talk through. So all will be sent to you, and please feel free to contact me. I'm obviously Tracy Childs, the Programme Manager for Team Coaching, so I'll be dealing with you if you have any questions or need support with your booking.
So say hello before you say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to not talk with you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tracy, I'm not sure if you're staying online. Just a question about Asia Pacific, because obviously the time zone doesn't work for me. I think you said you've got a partner organisation. Do I just go directly to them?
Yeah, so we can look to connect you in terms of Asia Pacific. Peter Hawkins' company, Renewal Associates, do run programs, certificate level programs out in that region. So I'll connect you if you're comfortable through to his assistant, who can let you know about program dates and options.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much. And
I'll make a note
Max
to write to you independently.
Oh, that's all right. Nice to meet you. Thanks for staying up.
Yes, thank you.
Now I'm going to go and have a snooze. Take care. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nadia. Bye.
Bye.